Today I'm going to be sharing 5 crucial things you need to know if you want to start a podcast or if you have a podcast. So these are mindsets or important things you need to keep at the back of your mind if you have a podcast. If you know them and live them, then your podcasting journey is going to be smoother. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Norma Valerie and this channel is for creators who want to make a career from their passions. So 5 things you need to know before you start a podcast. So number 1, your listens, your downloads will be low in the beginning. Podcasts are not that easy to find. So even if your podcast is good, you might have low listens in the beginning. So don't expect that you post your first episode and thousands of people come to your podcast. The only time you see that thing happening is when it's famous people. If you want to increase your podcast listens, you need to make you as the host more visible. You need to have a presence online so that people can find you and check out your podcast. So even if you don't want to have an online presence, you can go on other people's podcasts and be a guest. This is something I know that works because if you reach out to a podcast and say, okay, please, I want to be a guest on your podcast, I promise to bring value. So those listeners of that podcast, if they like you, they'll check out your podcast. And this is very effective because number 1, they're already podcast listeners. So you don't need to convince anybody that, see, my podcast is actually good. They already listen to podcasts. And number 2, they're already on the podcast app. So it's just going to be easy to search your name or search your podcast name and find you. I've been a guest on a few podcasts and this is something that I'm still trying to work better. But I've already seen the effects of being on another person's podcast because their listeners somehow just check your podcast out. And some of them stick around. Social media does not help your podcast the way you think it does. Basically, social media is social media. So if you want to build an online presence for your podcast on social media, you need to have something important. Of course, you can get people that will listen to your podcast on social media. But if you're just a generic podcast on social media, most people will not follow you because they already know what you're going to post. You're going to be posting updates. And people don't go to social media to go and listen to podcasts. They go on social media to go and be entertained, to go and be educated, or whatever they go there to do. So if you want to create a social media page, you need to provide value and not just, new episode out, new guest on this podcast. You need to provide value. Understand, look at your own behavior. When you go on Instagram, when you go on TikTok, when you go on Twitter, you're not going there to go and check, my favorite podcast, have they posted? You're going to go on your podcast app to go and listen to podcasts if that's what you want. So if your favorite podcast has a social media page, it's not because of updates, it's because they have something inherently valuable in their social media page. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. So social media does not really help the way you think it does because getting people to click the link in your bio is like very hard when they are on social media. You need to understand that if you want to build a following on social media for your podcast, you need to create separate content. And the thing is that some people might follow you, but they might not end up listening to your podcast. The third thing you need to know is you need to join a community of podcasters. Podcasting, like most of content creation, is like a lonely job. So most people you know might not be into podcasting and it might be hard to explain what you are doing or what you're up to to people that don't understand it. So if you join a community of podcasters, even if it's online and you don't know them in real life, it will actually help you because you are seeing people who are doing the same things that you are doing, they're having the same struggles that you are doing. Many communities online will have programs or events or whatever it is, whether physically or online, to just rub minds with people that are doing the same thing as them. So when you join a community of podcasters, it just helps you and you feel more grounded. Even in times when you feel like quitting, just go back to your community and read the latest updates or check out the latest updates and you just feel, okay, that these are my people. They are doing the same thing that I'm doing. And if they've not quit, why should I quit? First thing is editing can be so draining. Like editing is my least favorite part of podcasting and it's something that you cannot escape if you want your podcast to be good because there are times when you make a mistake, there are times when you just have pauses, you have to think about what you want to say. You cannot leave that in your podcast. At least when editing a video, you can see yourself, you can see your face and like it's engaging a little bit. But when you're editing your podcast, it's just those spiky lines that you're saying and it can get so boring and repetitive if your podcast episode is long and you have to do it weekly. But you just need to understand that sometimes you have to do things that you don't like. Editing is not something I look forward to, but if you truly want to be a podcaster, you need to embrace it because it's not enjoyable, but you need to do it. And without it, your podcast will not be good. So you need to associate editing with good things. So maybe after you edit your podcast episode, you can watch a movie. Just try to make the process enjoyable for you so that you can keep on podcasting. Because the times that I wanted to quit my podcast is when I'm editing, because it's just so tiring and it takes too long to edit and so on. So you can do it in little breaks, like 20-minute increments. That okay, 20 minutes this morning, 20 minutes in the evening, 20 minutes tomorrow. So it just make you enjoy it better than to spend 2 hours, 1 hour just looking at those disgusting lines. So the next thing to know is that every podcast episode must have a point. So there must be a value exchange that you're doing when you're recording a podcast episode. So even if you're ranting, you're angry, or whatever it is that you're doing on your podcast, that podcast episode must have a point. So even if it's to entertain, to educate, to make your listeners feel connected to you, you must ask yourself, okay, why am I recording this podcast episode? Am I doing it to encourage somebody? Am I doing it to tell people what I've been up to? So you just need to ask yourself that this podcast episode, does it have a point? If it doesn't have a point, then don't waste your time, because it might not be useful. So every podcast episode must have a point. Last thing that you need to know about your podcast is that your podcast is yours. So whatever you want to do with it, you should do with it. So if somebody tells you that, okay, your podcast is not professional, you should make it more professional. You sound like a radio show or whatever it is. You had a reason why you started your podcast or why you want to start your podcast. So you need to filter out feedback. Obviously, there's going to be constructive criticism. Like when I started my podcast, there were a lot of people that complained that my intro was too long and too loud. So obviously that's constructive criticism, and I shortened it and I lowered the volume. So that's something that you have to listen to, because if you keep on annoying your listeners, they're not going to listen again. The kind of criticism I'm talking about is if you started your podcast to banter and just gist with friends, and somebody tells you, oh, your podcast is not professional, it needs to sound like a radio show. If that's not your plan, that's not your plan. Do not let anybody influence what you wanted, your idea, your goal for your podcast. So in the same vein, like it's like comparing a television show to a YouTube video. So if you want it to have the quality of a television show, then have it. If you want it to be more chill and more laid back, you should have it. So you need to be able to filter feedback. Not every feedback is meant for you. If they don't like your podcast, they will go and look for another podcast. And people that like your style of podcasting will find you. So filter feedback. That's all for this video. I just wanted to share things that I low-key wished I knew before I started. So I hope you've gotten value from this video. And if you have, please like and subscribe and leave a comment. Which tip do you think you needed to hear the most? Till next time.